Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of PR Explored. This is a PR podcast where we delve into trends and topics related to public relations. I'm your host, Michelle Garrett. I'm a PR consultant and writer, and my guest today is Jennifer McGinley. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, nice to see you.
Yay, I'm
Really
so
excited to do this.
excited to
Yeah.
have you. You and I have known each other for
Oh gosh,
quite a while.
at least 5 years, at least
Say.
5 to 7 years.
And we met online, of
I
course.
know. In our group, I know.
Yeah. So I'm so excited that Jennifer is here. We have a great topic today. We're going to be talking about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and what it means as far as coming up with a communications strategy and approach that's effective. Because I think every organization really needs to be aware and prepared, and we're going to talk all about that. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Jennifer. I know she's a public relations consultant who specializes in working with healthcare clients, but I wanted to talk a little bit more. Tell us a little bit more about you, Jennifer.
Oh, thank you. Yes, over 30 years in public relations, specializing in healthcare, and that's academic health centers, especially medical school, pharmacy school. And so I even specialize even more in mental health, working at a couple of psychiatry or psychiatric hospitals, mental health facilities, or behavioral health organizations. There's a couple ways you can word that. But I think as a business owner for almost 8 years, I really specialize in media relations, community outreach, and reputation management, with the goal of increasing connections, visibility, and credibility for my clients. And I think especially now, really as always, it's really important for everybody to have their ducks in a row, so to speak.
Yes, and we'll get into this, but you and I were talking a little bit beforehand about just how important it is, as far as just really every company needs to be ready for this now, right? There isn't really an organization anywhere that doesn't need to be thinking about today's topic. So
I agree.
So we'll get into this. Let's see. How should we start? Let's start with definitions of these terms, because I think a lot of times people think they know what it is. I mean, I myself have to um, look up the definitions to make sure that I understand, which way, which one it is, because they're all related, but they're just a little bit different. So
Absolutely.
I will put those definitions up.
Yeah.
Um,
And I can go through them too. For misinformation, and this is, I
yes.
went old school to the to the Oxford. Misinformation is defined as wrong information that is given to someone, often in a deliberate attempt to make them believe something which is not true. It refers to false or inaccurate information shared either by mistake or with the intention to deceive. Then you have disinformation, false information that is spread deliberately to deceive, mislead, or confuse people. And then the third, and this is actually kind of new to me, by a friend that owns Truth in Common. Malinformation is real information shared out of its original context or manipulated to cause harm. So that's information taken out of context. So it could be real information, and they're all a little bit confusing and kind of an apropos for the definitions we're trying to explain here.
Yes, I was not familiar with malinformation until we started preparing for this and you mentioned it. So I think that's important because maybe not everybody doesn't, again, I think, first of all, I always think of, misinformation is somebody that's just misinformed. They're not doing it maliciously, right? They're just sharing information that is wrong,
Right.
factually incorrect.
Yep.
Disinformation, and I think we have a pretty recent example of this, is false information that's spread deliberately. And then the malinformation is information, the manipulated information. And so that's what we're probably going to see more of with AI and deep fakes and all of that. So I think I don't know. It's good to get the definitions, correct in your head, but like also it's a category that, everybody kind of needs to be thinking about. And yeah.
I agree. Absolutely. I'm trying to think, where do you think your viewers, um, want us to, what path should we take with all of this information?
Oh, well, I mean, you know, the the thing is, um, it's none of this is new as far as, we talk about fake news, and that's been around for a while, and that's kind of where this falls, but it also falls into just crisis communications. And you said something before we started, and I want you to talk about that a little bit. Talk about how everybody needs to be in crisis mode, right?
Yeah, I do. And I hate to go back to 5 years ago, but I think I learned so much that we all now, as organizations, need to kind of operate from a crisis situation so that we're always prepared. And I think if break down your communication, your communication strategy, um, by being prepared. But the other thing that I talked to preface that is I thought about your reputation precedes you. And
Mhm.
that's that starting point for all organizations, even for startups. You need to think about your mission, your core values. What do you as a leader stand for? What does the organization stand for? And then, you take that information with a proper internal communications to your employees. You start with your internal communications plan.
Mhm.
Um, and I think then you go for the PR crisis mode, which is practicing scenarios, making sure the proper leadership or administration, or shareholders, stockholders, trustees are properly media trained, and then practicing scenarios that could happen and coming up with a template for responses, or press releases, or crisis responses, and
Mhm.
make sure everything is mobile, whether it's through a Google Doc or something more sophisticated, all contact information. But I remember when I did a video series a long time ago, the most important thing is to create an environment of trust surrounding your organization. So when there is a crisis, you're already ahead of the game. Because if somebody sees false information, they're going to think, wait a minute, that's not like them.
Mhm.
That they wouldn't do that. And then they could reach out and say, hey, I saw this information online. Is that true? Or something on Reddit,
Mhm.
you had mentioned, or all the other social media outlets popping up a lot of times on a daily basis. Um, but I think it's that know, like, and trust factor within, communications, and public relations professionals that we're always kind of hammering to our clients. You need to create trust, so that when a crisis hits, and I think that goes for creating, trust with your local media, the local media outlets, so that local news, a lot of stuff goes local first. And if it goes up on a Facebook post, I mean, sometimes you can be screwed. I know, like, the examples from that Harvard Business Review article, that stuff happens, but you
Yeah.
need to get ahead of it.
Yeah, it can spread very quickly, right? So, and unfortunately, people are just all too ready to believe information that isn't factually correct. So, again, people, obviously can believe whatever they would like to believe. However, we're going to talk a little bit about facts, and I think you have some statistics to share as we get a little bit further into this. But what always gets me is that I feel like a lot of companies, I've been, doing PR a long time, as have you. They often don't think that they are going to be in a crisis. And they don't really have a plan in place. They don't have a team. There should be somebody from, obviously, your leadership, but then also somebody from the legal team, somebody from communications or PR. Somebody, there should be certain people from your company on this, crisis team, this core team of people, and those folks should know, what to do, how to, immediately address, we're going to put out a holding statement. We're going to, there's going to be things that they know to do, and they are going to have run through kind of maybe a scenario or two of, what might happen, how it might work, just to be prepared so that they're not just caught, running around, in the midst of a crisis.
Right. And two, I always think about HR and how they have to be careful. And I know with social media, what are the protocols and systems in place so that the employees know their boundaries and guardrails and what is expected of them? We've had a lot of crises nationally lately that people go online and say things in the heat of the moment. I think a lot of it is about emotion and emotion
Mhm,
or behavior and being tired and frustrated and upset and scared.
mhm.
I do look at it from like a behavioral health perspective and how people feel about things too. And I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, it's hard to if you have it prepared, of course, I think it's easy for emotion to just kick in and take over, and, especially if you're public facing, so, you're out there as the spokesperson or what have you, and you don't have any, like you said, media training really, or experience. You haven't practiced, you don't know, like, it's just it would be very difficult to come across, I think, as calm and credible and all the things that you would want to be in that situation. So I think it's really important, for companies to be have a crisis plan in place and have that core team in place and make sure, people leave companies. And so if you have a crisis plan and it sits on a shelf and you never revisit it, maybe half the people that were on the core team have changed jobs or left the company. And so, it's just good to revisit it from time to time in addition to having one. So, that's something I think,
Yeah.
to talk about. So, and I just as an example, the other day, of something that we talk about fake, what is a fake, example of a fake news story, that was created by AI. I saw this example of the CN Tower in Canada. It was on fire. It was all generated by AI. It was not a real crisis. So, and you just don't know when that could happen. Obviously, I think some organizations are more likely to be targeted than others. However, you just don't know
Right.
when it might
Right.
happen to you. So,
Yeah.
I put that link up there if anybody wants to check that out. But it looked very real. And again, it could be your CEO. Maybe they create a fake video of your CEO saying something, that affects your stock price, or it could just be any number of things. So I
Yeah.
think companies are not really thinking about this yet, but it's starting, it's happening. So I think, we need to remind people that, it's good to be thinking through and preparing.
Yeah, and I always think too about talking points. And I remember listening to oh gosh, I don't remember his name, but he was doing a media training and talking about, and I think this is good. It's a shape, it's a triangle, and have three talking points prepared, so that at least you go in an interview, or if it's a stand-up live shot, or it's a last minute interview. I know with podcasting, sometimes you have more time, but if you can quickly jot down 3 points, um, I think that's like a fair amount of information to get in, to have ready,
Mhm,
to be prepared.
mhm.
But I think we've seen a lot of people interviewed lately that are not prepared, and then mistakes can happen. And it is our job as PR professionals to be the ones preparing, as long as our clients listen to us.
Or they bring us in the loop, right? Because
Yes,
sometimes,
yes, not at the last minute either. I always like to be, part of the day to day, so I can kind of suss out things and distill
right,
information. And so
yeah.
I'm on top of it, and I'm always thinking worst case scenario. That's the way my brain works anyway, just to kind of what is the worst thing that could happen, and we need to be prepared.
yeah, what is the worst thing that can happen, right? I mean, that's a good way to think about it because if you prepare for the worst thing and something less bad happens,
Yes,
at least
yes.
you'll have
Yeah, yeah. And it
somewhere to
is, and I
see.
think that's how you survive a crisis in a positive way. Not only, again, that reputation and the trust, but communicating, clear communication
Mhm.
concisely, consistently, internal shareholders, stockholders, trustees.
Yeah.
And then, I know a lot of times people find out information online, but they were never briefed ahead of time. And I think taking that moment and taking that breath to, do the internal
Mhm.
communications first. It's really respectful, and things in a crisis move very, very quickly. So everybody needs to have their act together.
Well, you don't want your employees to be finding out about it, like, on TV or whatever, like, you really want everybody internally to be informed, ahead of time, and I think you mentioned, employees have social media too, and so then, they could be out there sharing misinformation, maybe even innocently because
Right.
you didn't take time to communicate what's really going on with them, and so then they're just like, "Oh," they see something and they're running with it, before they really know, what's real and what's not.
Yeah, and that's about, that internal trust and bonding as employees need to do with their leaders. That starts from the top down, and also, what protocol is in place. You can't share your personal beliefs online if you're an employee. I mean, I think apparently that hasn't been discussed often in organizations, and a lot of people in the heat of the moment get their anger out online. And you know, I think I think there's a huge amount of compassion, understanding that's needed too,
Mhm.
um, because of where we are right now. And it doesn't matter. I think it's employees need to be respectful and considerate. I think that's really important.
Yes, of course, we can't, we can't always
No,
dictate
no,
how that comes
absolutely.
out, but I
Yeah,
think if you treat them with respect, hopefully, that will at least it's a better tone, an
yeah,
example set, so that, maybe they'll follow suit, because, again,
exactly.
if you neglect them, it might come back to haunt you if you're
Yeah,
not, forthcoming with them and being respectful of, what they need to know before everybody else finds out, right? So,
right. Yeah,
uh,
employees deserve to be taken care of. They really do.
yeah.
I agree. I agree. I'm trying to think, should I go down with, I can talk about factors that influence spread of false information. Um, and, that would include human behavior, emotion response, algorithms. And I think people are so confused right now about algorithms and how quickly they change. And I think I tested out on my own platforms that if I start watching something, all of it comes in. If I'm about to take a trip, all of a sudden I'm getting all this
Oh,
trip advice and clothing and packing and all this stuff. If I'm doing research on a topic, all of that comes forward. So, in one way, we can control the information coming in, and one way we can't. And I sometimes I feel like we're all we've all been sucked in, and we're all suckers with social media. And taking that break is really important. And
well,
then, yeah,
I think I forget that not everybody, has a journalistic training. I have a journalism degree, so my filter is gonna be different than someone else's
yeah,
filter, right? So I'm
absolutely,
looking at it from I mean, I can almost tell right away, if something seems off, I'm not gonna share it at least until I double check it, and then there are certainly sources that are, I think, more credible than other sources that I trust more than other sources to share stories, and if a source that I don't know is sharing
right.
something and it seems at all, like, off, why would I but again, that's my thought process, and I know that not everybody, thinks critically and thinks about that before they just hit share, and then it's off and running.
Yeah, it's exhausting. I mean, I think it's exhausting now to just read something, especially online, And you have to really, I know you need to vet your sources, check several outlets. There's a website called Fact Check I use. And then Ground, I forget, and I apologize. It's Jessica Yellen. She is a part of News Not Noise. She's a former White House correspondent that's gone off on her own. And she'll post information, factual information. And it's really going to a source you trust. But I tend to look every time, if I'm not sure, I'll vet 3 different sources to see
Mhm.
that the commonalities show up.
Well, I also go into Google News and look it up, and then it will show, it'll have a whole bunch of stories will come up if it's, something, a hot news story. And then you can see, okay, so which sources have written about it? Are they all saying the same thing? Are there a few in there that I trust? And then
Mhm.
that seems like it's probably a real, but then even the headlines can vary. So
Yes,
I sometimes will, if I'm going to share something, I'll pick and choose based on, okay, well, how is this framed? Because a lot of people don't read past the headline
agree.
or the first, paragraph of a story. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But it is, you're right. I mean, I think in journalism and PR communications, we're curious. And we also have become very good at taking big loads of information and narrowing it down into very succinct sentences, so people can understand it in kind of bite-sized pieces. But that takes a lot of work. I saw something like this, the least bit of information is the most work to curate because, we're trying to get information that's very, you want
Hmm.
it to be palatable and understandable by other people, but, we
Yeah.
are ourselves overloaded with information and news all day long, you
I
know.
just saw too, and I don't know, I forget the source of this, but that the majority of people are getting their news from Facebook and YouTube, which I kind of saw that trend happening over the past, probably 9 or 10 years, and that always disturbed me. And I don't know. I mean, obviously there are reputable news outlets that have news that they share on YouTube or Facebook. However, and when I hear that, I just think it's not reporters, it's a lot of it is not organizations that are, credible news gathering, or so that's a little tricky, I think,
Yeah,
too.
it's unnerving. I know when I look at something, I click on to read the bio of that person, and if there's nothing there, it's probably a bot or, and I know a lot of people are going onto Substack. So it's it's becoming more difficult. And so I empathize with people
Mhm.
that are frustrated about
Yeah.
where to get good information. I know Pew Research came out with something that said more than 8 in 10, and this is global, yet more
Mhm.
than 8 in 10 adults across 35 countries surveyed said made up news is a big problem. 59% said it's a very big problem. And 51% of Americans said made up news is a very big problem. And then from sciencedirect.com, 50% of social media users believe fake news. If you
Mhm.
believe it, it's true, and I
Yes.
think we're too tired to look. And then, if it's along our normal, I think, what is the word I want to say? Aligns with our personal identity and the belief system we already have, then it kind of works for that narrative, But for people to step out and have a different perspective, I think that's a lot of work and can be very tiring sometimes. And I, from it, from the American Psychological Association, it said people are more likely to share misinformation when it aligns with their personal identity or social norms, and when it
Mhm.
elicits strong emotions such as fear or outrage. And and that's what I think shows up on Facebook and Reddit, when people are in heated discussions, and I'll go in and click and look at comments, and I'm like, wow, that's where we come up with our own emotions, and the exhaustion can set in.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about from a from a company and organization perspective. What can how can companies really best prepare for all of this? I mean, obviously, there's no like one one best way to do it or
Yeah.
one answer to the problem because we've kind of set the stage and discussed how it's just a kind of a growing issue, but let's put on our, counselor, peer counselor hat for a minute and just think about like, what can they do if they want to kind of stay prepared in the event that they are, a victim of a deep fake or misinformation.
Yeah, and I think it does go back to being aware of the crisis communications plan, but it starts way before that. It starts with, listening to your employees, having task forces. I know when I worked at a hospital years ago, um, I think it was the housekeeping staff wanted to join a union, to become a part of a union. And so what we did in our department was we began having town halls, 6 a.m., 6 p.m. The CEO and the COO gathered the employees to talk about all their frustrations, their complaints, their fears, their concerns, so that they could really kind of boots on the ground understand why they came to that desire in the first place. So I think I know one of my clients is a huge, academic health center, and they do these often where the CEO will get on virtually or within the organization at all different times of day so that they can meet with everybody and talk
Mhm,
about, hey, what's going on? Or this is our update. So it's almost like a campaign, creating a branded campaign to get to know your employees. And I think everything starts inside first so that the information filtering down is valid information, statistical
mhm,
and factual information, and you're calming nerves and you're keeping the heat down, you know, keeping
mhm,
everything a little bit more logical and calm, cool, and collected. I
mhm,
think that is really, really helpful because I think a lot of angry employees and upset and employees that don't feel heard or respected, I think a
mhm,
lot of problems can stem from that situation. So starting internally, creating a communications plan, internal communications plan, and then going outside and making sure that if you're holding events that you're getting good positive media coverage, and also it's kind of filling in the puzzle pieces so that is your CEO interviewed and doing podcasts? Are your employees photos on social media? I know we've had really, really good luck and great engagement when we are highlighting our employees. It's like employee of the quarter, employee of the month, or they're
mhm,
doing some community outreach and we have photos from an event. They love it so much. And employees are getting engaged online in a positive way. And so that's just been so much fun. So, you know, I think highlighting your employees and all the good things that are going on, that increases the positive energy in an organization. And then, a media relations plan and a marketing plan that aligns with all of those things. And everything kind of needs to run in alignment. And I think, run together. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm sitting here thinking about, how healthcare organizations are probably really, they really have their work cut out for them, right now. So,
Mhm.
and it's nice to see because I feel like, we are seeing some come out with their own kind of speaking for themselves, not necessarily just, "Okay, yes, we're going along with, information that's being shared, publicly that may or may not really be correct." So, I
Yeah.
love to see that, and it must come from preparation and forethought. I mean,
Yeah.
or at least quick, response, being able to put together something quickly and being able to respond.
Yeah. And that's I was thinking about social media, like on a personal level, I wouldn't be on it at all if I didn't have to, but I do social media management, and it's a way to
Mhm.
engage and increase awareness and visibility. But the good thing that I love so much about social media is creating community. It's creating platforms to spread good, credible information so that
Right.
people, you can, calm the fears. And
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many medical organizations, public health organizations, and experts that I follow that they are out there so quick with a statement to debunk a lot of the stuff that's been online right now. And I think having that out there creates the rise of good information that's really helpful for
Mhm.
patients and consumers and the public and communities overall. So I think, again, it's who do you trust? I
Mhm.
remember interviewing several pediatricians before I picked one, and it was word of mouth from my OBGYN because I trusted her. So I think that word of mouth is really important too, as long as the information is, it's not that telephone game from decades ago where, so on and so on, where you're, getting little bits and pieces of information, but you're getting the real factual, most up-to-date information.
Yeah.
And consumers unfortunately um, have to take the onus is on them in terms of getting the
Mhm.
factual information. But I think and I hope that all of us are, um, I guess, blessed with going to medical professionals that we trust.
Mhm.
I love my providers and I trust them and I question them and I'll bring information like, is this true? Is this not? What is your opinion?
Yeah.
Especially with all the menopause stuff that's out there. There's, in social media, there's just so much information. And I know my provider said, be careful when our products being sold. Just be aware of when
Mhm.
somebody
Mhm.
is selling something, as well as providing medical information. Just these little tips.
Yeah, I mean, we do not have time to get into the health and wellness, misinformation and malinformation and all of it, today, but
Yeah, that's a good topic. That could go on.
I think what you said is anybody trying to sell something, anybody that's gonna benefit financially from whatever
Yeah,
they're saying, I mean, not
yeah.
that we all don't market and try to sell our services or our products, I mean,
Right,
obviously,
right.
but I feel like, if again, I'm just very skeptical a
Yeah,
all the time, and I really don't like that it has to be that way, but I feel
yeah,
like, it does serve you well if you kinda have a critical eye when you're looking at anything
yeah.
almost, unless, again, you know who you can trust, like, I f like, you could hopefully, you could trust your healthcare provider, your doctor. Hopefully, you have professionals in your network you can trust,
Yeah,
depending on what you're looking at, but yeah, I think, that's why the trust matters so much,
yeah.
and it's not something you can create overnight, it's something that you work on, continually,
It
constantly,
is. It's
consistently.
that slow trajectory. I was explaining that to a potential client 2 weeks ago that, you know
Mhm.
when you talk about the importance of trade publications and, media relations and building that trust, building that visibility, it takes time, but that's worth it. When anything is done too quickly, that's when mistakes can be made. It takes time and then it's solid. And you've got background information that people can find to show they said this. And then people kind of
Yep.
know that long, bit of information that the journey has been there. And I like what you said too about the trust. And, you know, I trust a board certified physician or other credible experts. Look up their information. You need
Mhm.
to look at, I mean, you're not going to buy a dishwasher or other appliance without getting reviews on it. So we should do the same thing with everything. And maybe this is a good thing in terms of being a little bit more skeptical and educating ourselves.
Yes.
This
Yep.
is the positive part. If you need a silver lining, it is, you know, weeding out a lot of the stuff on social media. There's no barrier to entry. And that's what I remember when all of this started. I'm like, people can come out of the woodwork and try to sell you something, and you don't even know who they are. What is their educational background? What is their purpose? And there are some really well educated, certified MP, registered dietitians and physicians out there, and they are selling things. So then that, like, there's no blanket, there's no black and white here. It's all a case by case basis.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. You were talking about pediatricians, and I remember, like, being, a new mom and thinking,
yes,
because it's like you hear all kinds of advice, but it's like, who are you going to trust? And then somebody said that to me. You have to figure out who you're going to listen to, whose
yeah,
advice you're going to follow. And that was my pediatrician. So
yeah,
even if another mom told me something, that didn't necessarily mean that I would go by that advice unless I checked with my trusted
yeah,
doctor. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, being a mom, I think being a parent today is so hard because we would go to books
Yeah.
to look, and now it's just this flood of information all day that's, it's all over. It's so it's this misinformation, disinformation, malinformation age that we're in is causing chaos and crisis and confusion.
Mhm.
And that's the hard part. That's the sad part.
Well, and some people benefit from that and want
Yeah.
that's what their goal is, right?
Yeah, it
So,
is. It is.
and again, that's something to be skeptical about. So why is this person who isn't an expert sharing this information? What did they stand to gain from it?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, again, it's being
Yeah.
skeptical, it's looking at who you trust. I mean, it just comes back to those things over and over again.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think weeding out the experts that aren't valid, I think that's going to be um, the hard part. But I think if we're armed, with fact checking, there's debunking, pre-bunking, there's literacy training. And I want to shout out to Deanna Troost of Truth in Common. It's truthincommon.org. And she is doing fabulous work in bringing communities together to do media literacy. And it doesn't matter, where you sit, but just coming together to understand information and
Mhm.
the positives and the negatives, I think is it behooves all of us to educate ourselves, and also
Right.
our purpose and our why behind things too. That why are you going to, float off an email to
Mhm.
somebody or a text or put something up online, like, and I know personally, do I need to share this? Why am I sharing this information? What's your purpose first? Even if
Mhm.
it's a great travel picture, why am I doing that? And then I'm like, it's not necessary. I'd say 98% of the time I'm like, I don't need to do that.
I've been doing that more and more often. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I don't know," because we I think it becomes like a habit to, "Oh, I'm
Yeah.
doing this thing, I've gotta share it, I've gotta post about it." It's like, maybe
Yeah.
not. I
And
don't know."
our private lives can be private. I think you get in the habit of, do we need to share everything? Do we really need to? Like, what's the purpose? What is
Yeah.
your true purpose or motivation?
Well, from a company or organization perspective, it's good to think about that too, because
Yeah,
obviously, you wanna be careful and use forethought in what you're posting and
right. Yeah.
who you're amplifying too, because I think sometimes,
Yes.
we have partners or industry, other companies in the industry that we might respect or know, and so it's important to understand like which ones are credible, before you're doing that. So just trying to look at it through that lens. Um, I want to talk a little bit about, we've kind of talked about, well, you here's how to prepare. First of all, we have to be aware,
Mhm.
we have to know it's the information, the misinformation can get us, can be out there, can come for our company. We have to be prepared with a crisis plan and a team and so forth. But what happens? What if a company actually does see misinformation about it shared? What should it do?
Yeah, I think it depends on the protocols they have in place about what is their daily um can't like what is their daily social media purpose, and their plan. And I think as long as it's consistent, I would recommend, well, the social media manager and going to the leadership team and advising or counseling them on what to do. It just, I think if it's a crisis on a normal day without the social media back in the day, you're going to want to get ahead of it, and you're going to, talk about this misinformation and what the truth is. I know some organizations let things slide, like it's not that big of a deal. Let's just
Mhm,
put it under the carpet. Nothing's going
mhm,
to happen. But I think now it behooves organizations to, and I know when I'm watching social media, if it's a great post and there's all this positive stuff, and then somebody has to put a zinger in there, like that is not the experience I had when I was a patient. I go right to the communications director. I'm like, listen, this is what
mhm.
happened. We need to address it. So I think it's better to nip it in the bud and be honest and transparent about it, because otherwise it's going to bite you in the rear end on the back end. Plus, if an organization gets ahead of it, that's increasing trust. Again, that's
Mhm.
that, it's, information for good.
Yeah, don't just sit back. I mean, you have to kind
Mhm.
of be proactive because I want to go back just for a second because when you said that, I've seen companies talk about, and people have told me this, that they don't do anything. If there's something out there, they because it's going to blow over so fast, they
Right.
think that in another day or two, there's going to be another news story that's going to take over, and it's not even going to be a thing. So we're just going to act like it didn't happen, you know. So I did that just that when I heard that, and this was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, somebody was talking about it, I was like, "Wow, really?" Like,
Yeah. That's the
so
stuff
I
that
don't
keeps us up
know.
at night.
Say that again?
I said that's the stuff that keeps PR people and communicators up
Yeah.
at night, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, that was just something to me. I was like, "Wow, really? Okay, that's the strategy now. Okay,
That's what you
well."
should do it.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
still online though, right? So if somebody's
Yeah, that's
searching,
the
they
thing,
can,
and it's
you
kinda
know.
nice when someone says something and they quickly say, "Actually, this is what happened." That's online, and they can go back saying, "Oh, there is a consistent response time and a consistent response, and somebody's listening and watching, and they do care." So that's another way for an organization to promote themselves in a way or increase their visibility and credibility, that they're actually watching what goes on, because it's not so much on your 6 o'clock news as it is on social media platforms. That's where all the energy is and all the information and misinformation. And,
Yeah.
never assume it's going to blow over, because something so tiny can blow up because of heated discussions online.
Yeah, and then again, and a lot of companies, I mean, here's something else. I don't think a lot of companies always monitor what is being said about them online,
Yes.
in places like Reddit or, obviously some more companies probably pay attention to Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, but they may not be in some of those other platforms like Reddit. And there's a lot of discussion, and that people on Reddit do not pull any punches. And it
No.
comes up in search. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
Google kind
that's
of
true.
favors it. So
Yeah.
it's just again, if you have I don't know, social listening software or a team that can kind of
Yeah.
monitor what's being said about you, you can set up alerts. I mean, they're even free. Obviously, Google Alerts, TalkWalker has free alerts. You
Yeah.
can set those things up so that at least even if you are a small company on a limited budget, you have some idea that if people are talking about you and what they are saying, because you do need to know those things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I know one of the fun things, I forget, we're going to post it actually for our work tomorrow. What is being said on such and such? I think it was Reddit about the organization, and some positive things have come up. And actually, the organization I work with had such a beautiful testimonial, and it was just online. And she even said, I hope somebody sees this. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad. I was monitoring because I was like, went to my contact, and she was just floored at what a beautiful review that this wonderful woman had said. And so it's not always bad stuff, but you want to promote the good stuff too. And that's really good for employees to hear. Employees need to know that they're doing a good job. because people tend to, especially in like the restaurant business or service industry, they only hear complaints and the bad stuff. But what about when something beautiful comes in, something positive and motivating? We need those too.
Oh, yeah, I think in general, you just need to know what's being said about you, right?
Yeah,
And it's helpful,
absolutely.
even if it isn't negative, it's helpful to know because you can use those things, as you say, for a morale boost, for you could use it in your PR or marketing efforts. It's just good to know, like, maybe there's feedback about your product or service that, your product marketing folks need to know, or your engineering team, your IT team, somebody needs to know. So, and customer service, that's another place, I
Yes.
think where, you're gonna be able to get some of that feedback so you can, your customer service team, if you have one, is probably hearing from customers,
Yes.
positively or negatively, and so it's really good to know, to check in with them as well. And I used to work in customer service a long time ago, so I kinda know, like, you hear a lot of bad things, but occasionally you
Yeah.
do hear good things too, so.
Same. I used to work with, patient satisfaction. So you hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I mean that's what helps with growth in organizations is how do they take that feedback and put it into action?
Yes. Yes, I'm putting the source of this, quote
Good.
I have, in the chat so that people can see. This Harvard Business Review article had some interesting points, I thought. They were saying that, 3 ways to leverage social proof to counter disinformation, and they are, monitor for social resonance, ensure transparency, and activate your allies. And I wanted to talk a little bit, about that third one because I think, if we're doing everything we can beforehand to kind of build our audiences, our fans and followers, we were talking about this at the beginning. You were saying, that can your kind of your followers, your fans can come to your defense because they know you, they know the company, they know, hopefully they know that it is not going to maybe engage in the behavior it's being accused of. So I just feel like that's really again something community building. I don't think it's I just think it's so important and I think it gets overlooked.
Yeah, no, community outreach is huge. You think about that's really the core of public relations is relationships.
Hmm.
It's building trust and in a very genuine, organic, grassroots way. You need to help your community. And whatever that looks like, whether it's, for profit, nonprofit, you're still going to have a community to serve. And I think when there is consistency in the programs that are done to increase that, they come to your defense. And, in crisis response speak, you need to build that team before a crisis happens because then they'll come to you. And especially with the way media used to work, if you worked, I used to love working with TV stations and radio outlets. And if there was a crisis, they would call me right away and say, "Hey, Jen, I heard this is happening. What's going on?" Actually,
Hmm.
and that response time within 30 minutes is always my goal to respond saying, "I don't have anything yet, but I'll let you know." And then
Hmm.
making sure that's that relationship building. And so now it's with freelancers, and it might be now, I know a lot of like in higher ed and healthcare too, organizations, they're using influencers to get the word out.
Hmm.
So that's and I think that's can be very serious work because you need to trust those influencers and what they're going to do and what they're going to say.
Yeah.
That's that's a
That's
lot.
another thing when you say influencer, I don't have a that doesn't,
No, it
conjure
doesn't. It can have a very negative connotation. And,
Mhm,
I think being careful in who you trust to kind of hold your brand and your business, that's really crucial. And it's a very precious
mhm.
thing to all
Yeah.
of a sudden, instead of doing ad spots or normal regular TV spots and interviews that you're, taking a chance on somebody to spread your message. I know there are contracts and payments involved, and that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah,
Mhm,
it's very fascinating how social media has just been such a game changer in everything that we do.
mhm.
you
No,
know.
I know, and definitely not always for the
Yeah,
best.
it's challenging.
Yeah, I was just going to put up a question about how does, if a company has to deal with misinformation, finds itself in a crisis, how does that impact their bottom line? Obviously, I know because I work with some brands in the food processing industry. If there is some kind of a crisis as far as a recall or food poisoning of anything like that, it can be a really serious issue. So it impacts their reputation, but it also impacts their bottom line. So I don't know if there's any research on that, but curious.
Yeah, I don't have stats on that, but I think the same thing goes for, a brand new maternity wing opening up or brand new research study that is just inputting out information and is sending out a press release. You know, First of all, when I would do work in a medical school and do a press release on research, I cannot tell you how many eyes and how long and the red tape. And it used to frustrate me. I was in my 20s and 30s, and I'm like, let's just get this done and out. But I look back and I'm like, thank goodness that's the whole point, is to have so many people involved so that when precious research is done and a study goes out with the results, we've had a lot of people overseeing this information, from legal and all the scientists and the PR professionals, the communicators, and the dean of the medical school and the whole team and trustees. And so you've got so many people making sure this is valid information that's going out, because we're supposed to serve the community and take care of people. And this is human beings involved. And like you said, in agricultural and food safety, it's the
Mhm.
same thing. We're dealing with human being safety. So, we take that to
Mhm.
heart, and we really, really care about the statistics and the facts, and they need to be right and they need to be perfect. You're not flying by the seat of your pants when, I used to visit scientists in labs and learn about things, and I would, interview them and take all the research back and then start doing more research and more writing. And the approval process, like I said, was so lengthy because it's something they've been working years or decades, so it's no small feat to get information out there. But if it's incorrect, it needs to be corrected. And a spokesperson needs to come out immediately and admit wrongdoing and make it right. And I know that's very hard. I feel
Mhm.
like people kind of get it more now, but it depends on the organization. And you know I think the integrity of the organization is on the line
Mhm.
in those situations, and you can really see um, the true colors of organizations and how they handle crises. So I think that's another thing consumers and the public can look at, is how did they handle that situation, and am I going to go to them in the future, and am
Mhm.
I going to trust them in the future? So it's a great way to build a reputation or burn it down immediately.
Yeah, and then people will always go and look at the stock price, and I'm like, "I don't know, though." Like, over time, there are people who won't get over that, who won't go
Yeah,
back to that brand. They'll switch to another brand. I'm thinking, several things came into my mind, but one of them was the Jif peanut butter from a few years ago. I used to buy Jif peanut. I don't buy it anymore, you know?
yeah, yeah.
So, and I probably won't because,
Hmm.
not only because of the crisis, but because I found out, that they have practices that are maybe not, totally ethical as far as,
Yeah,
some of the ingredients they use. But yeah,
yeah,
it's really interesting because then once you lose that, consumer, that buyer,
yeah. The
it's gonna be
loyalty.
hard to get them back. So
Yeah. And I know too, generationally, it hits generations differently on how organizations handle a crisis. I know millennials really look to the greater good of, you know, how organizations are doing. And even my own daughter in her 20s is like, we don't buy there anymore. We don't do this anymore. We're not
oh,
buying.
yes.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, update me, you know.
I know.
And they're
Yeah,
very
no.
aware. They're very, very astute, and they are really good at educating themselves on what's going on. So, um,
Yeah.
Organizations need to be up on all of that too. And that's
Yes.
the kind of behavioral science, probably. So that's so fascinating to me too.
Yeah, if they don't have kids, they need to spend some time like that's
Yeah,
the thing.
task
It's like
force,
my
right?
kids are one of my best sources of, keeping
Yes.
me up to speed on
Oh
things
yeah, they're
sometimes that,
blunt.
like
They're blunt.
sure I'm sure my friends that don't have kids of the same age are like that have no idea maybe,
No,
like
no,
but
yeah,
a lot of what they say there is, there's truth to it. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, no,
valid point.
you're actually right about that.
Yeah,
And I might not have thought about it that way had you not brought it to my attention. So I
yeah,
appreciate
yeah, and they're very opinionated. They're extremely opinionated. It's amazing how quick they are to like absolutely not or yes. If they're in, they're all in with a company. If they're out, they're out. I mean, it's
yeah.
ooh, that's tough. That's
It's
really
it's
tough.
impacted the way I look at my buying choices in many
Yeah,
cases. So I would say that they're very influential. So
yeah, yeah. And it is. It's like, picking a physician, picking a healthcare organization or a hospital. You're going to go and look at reviews, and reviews are so huge now. I mean, every time I go to a doctor's appointment, they want to know, those patient satisfaction surveys are huge. They're really pivotal. They really, and physicians, just like professors in the academic setting, are graded on how they handle themselves. So everybody's watching. It's we all have to be very careful how we conduct ourselves.
no pressure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a lot on the line.
Everybody's watching. That
Yeah,
is maybe what we will leave people with
yeah, everybody's
because
watching. Yeah, be
yeah,
careful what you say.
the
Take a
mic
breath.
is always on.
Yeah, it is somewhere. Take a breath. Take a breath.
Well, again, like, yeah, just speaking off the cuff, just be
Yeah.
prepared. And again, look to your comms team, your PR and comms team to
Yes, that's
help
our
you prepare.
job is to
Yeah,
is to guide you and lead you. And, after over 30 years, I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot, and I've learned a lot. And I can take that into that next client or that next meeting or say, you know what, this could happen, or worst case scenario, or just being prepared, right? And
yeah,
being careful, and always having your thoughts and the clarity before you speak.
mhm.
You can't talk off the cuff, and we go into interviews, and it's like, it's not off the record. Nothing's off the record.
No,
Yeah,
we could cite a lot of examples of,
yeah,
executives putting their foot in their mouth, and I think that's just because they think they don't need maybe they are actually caught off guard, but maybe they think they don't need, counsel or coaching or,
yes,
forethought, but they do.
yeah. And you can see those who have been trained and those who have not been trained.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes
I
a big
love a
difference.
good speaker. I love a good
I know.
I just it makes me so happy. I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know them, and they're on the news or a podcast. I'm like, oh, they did so well, just so
Yeah.
clear and crisp. And, I really appreciate good speakers and good communicators, good, clear communicators.
Yeah, we really need that. AI or not,
Yes.
we need human beings that know how to think
Yes,
critically and speak thoughtfully.
absolutely.
Yes, we absolutely
Yeah,
need
we
that.
really need to care and have compassion for others and see all sides of situations. I think
Mhm.
that's so important. It's the big picture that helps us come to a really good, logical decision.
Yes, I think that's a great note to, leave this on, and, again, I wanna thank you for being here. I thought this
Oh,
was a
this was so
really,
great. This was so good. It went
really
by fast. You're right.
yeah, it did go fast. It was a really helpful conversation for me,
Good.
and
I
I hope
hope
for
so.
people that are listening or watching, and I wanna thank Jennifer McGinley for being here. Please,
My pleasure.
check Jennifer's website, follow her on LinkedIn. If you have questions, maybe you're watching or listening to this after the fact, I'm sure Jen would be happy to, answer
Absolutely.
your questions at any time. She's a
Yeah.
wonderfully, not only insightful professional, but just a very like caring and warm person. So, and I know
Thank you.
that to be true. So,
Thank you. Thank
um,
you.
thank you for
Gotcha.
being here, and,
Thank you.
I will see you again soon, and I will make an announcement about our next, guest very soon. Thank you so much.
Have a beautiful day. Bye.
Bye.